Hello, beautiful humans. Thank you for joining Teach Jenn Tech. Today we have Miško joining us, and I'm very excited because this is a brand new concept to me as I've been learning about JavaScript and frameworks. So, Miško, please introduce yourself and what we're going to talk about today.
Hi, Jen. Thank you for having me. We're going to talk about today about this thing that I'm creating called Qwik. A little bit about me. Let's see. I did this thing called AngularJS that got kind of popular. So that's my prior life. Currently working as a CTO at Builder.io, and at Builder.io we're making a very cool. We're reimagining the way headless CMSs work. So that's kind of what I work on these days. But Qwik is my passion right now, and Qwik is a framework for building web apps, but it's very different than existing frameworks in that it really focuses on, or rather, let me preface it with, existing frameworks usually download all the JavaScript eagerly, and then the application runs. And what Qwik does is it goes the other way around. It tries super hard not to download any JavaScript until it absolutely has to. And for small applications, obviously makes no difference. But like once the applications gets large and big, it makes a huge difference in terms of performance.
Interesting. And to take it back a bit, we I've started to learn a bit about formats and different ways that JavaScript can be like. There's vanilla JavaScript that can't do, or like it's the bare basis that everything's kind of based off of, and then there's like I've done some work in React. I've done some work in Express. Like, if I remember correctly, we built a web app, and it was much more of like the front end,
Hmm.
where when we were doing Express, it was much more of the back end.
Hmm.
And eventually, those two are going to be on the show together to help me go from making a full app. It's going to be fun.
Yes.
So, where does to take it a step back? I know we're focusing on Qwik, but where does like Angular and Qwik go into that? Are they similar to either of those, since those are the ones
Yeah,
I've
yeah,
touched
they
on?
are. So I think the category is front end, right? So on the end of the day, you need to render something on a screen, right? You have to put characters and colors and boxes or whatever on the screen. And so you could do it manually, you just pure vanilla JS, but you're gonna discover pretty quickly that like that's just a lot of boilerplate, boring code. And for that reason, people create frameworks. And there's AngularJS, Angular, Svelte, Vue, React, Solid, to just name a few. There's gazillions, bajillions of them. And they all basically try to solve this particular problem by saying, hey, let me give you tools so that you can have easier time making things, painting things on a screen, and more importantly, easier time updating it, right? Because it's one thing to just paint something, quite another thing to be like, okay, now I have to go update it because now you change something, or you click on something, or you added something to a shopping cart, right? And so the kind of the bread and butter of what frameworks care about is how do I show you stuff, and then how do I update stuff based on your interaction.
Got it. Got it. Yay. I feel like this
Yeah.
is going to be, this is something that I've learned since joining working more on the back end of the tech world. And I'm saying back end of tech world, not just like back end developer, not there yet, but I've been in sales and in marketing and learning services. So it's much more teaching about the technology after the technology is developed is very different than being part of building the technology
Yes.
and updating. And it's definitely something that I've been on this journey for maybe a month now, where I started working on learning JavaScript, and then I've always wanted to become a DevRel. And so while I was working on finding out more of how to be able to do that, everyone's like, yo, you got the personality, but you don't have the tech or content. And I'm like, oh, well, we're going to do Teach Jenn Tech and get both. So I love that they all build on top of each other.
Yes.
And it's so similar yet different. And also something that I really do want to call out of thank you for being human. I know we touched on this very, very briefly, but I was very nervous about this. And I feel like this is something that so many newbies getting into tech are like, oh, I don't understand the tech. And there is a big comparison of what, you know, not all people can break it down or want to break it down. That's something I've learned on the podcast I also have, of like putting that intellectual burden on people. It's not something that's made for everyone. Yet there are so many kind people in this world that are definitely willing to break it down for you. And so thank you again for joining.
Mhm.
Um, would
So
you
what you're
say,
describing is this thing called curse of knowledge, right? Like
oh,
once you understand something, you have a really hard time imagining what it is not understanding something, right? And this is a
oh,
general problem for people, for humans, right? Is that once they understand something, it's like it's obvious. Like, of course it's obvious. Like, how are you so dumb not understanding something? Well, turns out before you understood this, like you were also on the other side where it wasn't obvious at all.
how,
Um,
how
yeah.
long did it take you to build like Angular and then now Qwik? Is it something that you did pretty quickly, like 6 months, or was it
No, it
something?
takes a long time. So let me back up a little bit first, and I want to point out that I feel like anything in life, including software, right? It's not that it is complicated. Like every single part of it is pretty simple. It's just there's a lot of it, right? So if you've been doing something longer, it's not really that you understand. I mean, things build up on each other and become complicated, right? But like the thing I really want to get across, and I always tell this to my kids as well, is that it's just bajillion small things that are in themselves pretty simple and straightforward, right? The difference really comes down to is just there's just so many of them, and because it's so many of them, it really just comes down to like the amount of time you spend on it, right? So it is just like you have to spend a lot of time on it to kind of go through it and learn all these things, but individually they're all pretty straightforward.
I love that.
So you asked me how long it took me to build AngularJS. Pretty long time actually, because I didn't know what I was doing. Right, it's a learning experience for everybody. I think AngularJS took about 2 years, but I mean that was a long time ago, and I can't quite remember. Um, with Qwik, it was much quicker. Quicker. It was only about a year, maybe a year and a half. We kind of knew already what we wanted, and so we were able to just go straight after the particular goal. But Qwik is also a lot more ambitious than what AngularJS was trying to do. AngularJS was one of the first ones in this particular space. I think the way you think about it is we kind of went through stages. You know, at the very beginning, browsers were didn't really even have JavaScript, right? They were not really interactive, and so you just
Mhm.
showed static documents. And so on a server, you would generate the HTML, send it to the client would show it, and that would be that. And at some point, we added JavaScript, and so we're like, oh, now we can make it interactive. And the first kind of interaction we added is that servers still produced HTML, and then after the fact, we sprinkled JavaScript on top of it. So we generated the content, and then we made the content interactive.
Okay.
And and the problem with that approach is that you kind of have to do it twice. You do it once on the back end, like, oh, I'm generating a clock, right? So I have to generate the clock. And then you go to the client and you go like, all right, the client has to update. So now I have to write code that is pretty much identical for updating the clock, right? And so creating the clock and repainting the clock end up being two things that you write in two different locations and two different languages, and it gets annoying pretty quickly. And so people were looking for kind of the unified answer to this particular problem, and the answer came in this component-based frameworks, I guess you could call them. And I like to think that AngularJS was one of the first. um, but the idea of component-based frameworks is that you write a component, and then that component runs both on a server and on a client. Originally, that wasn't the case. Originally, they only ran on a client, but then we kind of realized, like, oh, if it just runs on a client, then it takes a long time for the page to be painted, right? So you navigate to a page and you just see a blank page, right? Like just whiteness. And then the page says, oh, you need to go get the JavaScript and the framework and the application and everything. And so you go fetch all that stuff. And then you go and execute all that stuff. And so at some point, like a couple of seconds later, everything executes and downloads and runs. And like now you have your clock painted, right? And so there's a huge delay between like I navigate to a page and then I see something. And that's kind of the problem with like the first generation, like you want to call generations of frameworks. And so people came up with this idea of server-side rendering, right? And the idea is like, well, what if we ran the code on the server first, It's JavaScript, right? So we could do that. And then we can get a static snapshot of what the page will look like, send the static snapshot over to the client, and then in the client, you would run the code again. But instead of just staring at a blank page, you're now staring at the actual application. Of course, it doesn't work. Like it's just like a painting.
Okay.
But you have like, oh, at least I'm recognizing, oh, it's a clock. What can I do over here, right? And you can kind of think about it. Hopefully, by the time you kind of figure out like what do I want to do, no.
I have to go.
Okay, you go, buddy. Sorry. Hopefully, by the time you figure out what you want to do, the page was able to initialize and run all that stuff and become interactive, right? So we went from like white page to like wait 2 seconds to having an interactive thing to having a painting of the thing that you want, wait 2 seconds, and then have an interactive thing. And so that's an improvement. And so collectively, we call that the server-side rendering.
And thank you for explaining that. I think that's something that like I've previously worked at GoDaddy. So when I was in the hosting department, that was a big thing was, load time on websites that helps SEO, all of that.
Yes.
So I never knew all of this went into it. So it's definitely very cool to learn about. And hi, Dan, thank you for joining. And I think Miško is definitely no longer going to be a mysterious white void because he's joining today to talk about
why was I a mysterious white void?
Because nobody like you've done this cool thing, and so like nobody it's I think this is something that happens a lot in any industry where people that have accomplished something or is well known, people are like, oh well they're or they're untouchable, like, oh we'll never hear from them or something like that. It's something that I've heard from a lot of different platforms, and it's like, no, like it's just harder to get them because they get
busy.
So many messages.
Yeah, but like I mean, I understand how it could go to your head, right? Like, but I think at the end of the day, most people are pretty down to earth. It just comes down to like, people get a lot of messages, and so he's trying to juggle everything. But at the end of the day, people want to have fun anyways, and so like it's nice to come on a show and talk about things and like, this is my relaxing time,
And thank you for that. And just for all of the humans that have joined, as a heads up, Miško does know that he's going to have to break it down quite a bit for Teach Jenn Tech. Like we're not 100% there. And Miško, I really appreciate you breaking down a bit of I could almost say the theory behind it, or
that's the theory of it.
Yeah, the theory of it. It really helps learning the theory to understand what we're going to be going into.
Okay, so since I already gave you 3/4 way on a theory, so let me just finish the story.
Perfect.
So like, think about the stages, right? Stage 1 is everything is just server-side rendered, and there's no interactivity in the client. You have static pages. So obviously we're like, that doesn't work very well. We want interactivity. So stage 2 would be like, okay, server-side rendered, but then you sprinkle JavaScript on the client to make it interactive. This was kind of like the jQuery days. And the problem there is like you're duplicating work, and it's kind of hacky. It's ad hoc. It's not like, it doesn't scale very well, basically. So then people are like, okay, I have an idea. We'll do everything in JavaScript. And so you have the client-side frameworks that are born. And then the problem becomes, but it's slow before it interacts, right? There's this white void before like I can work it. And so the server-side rendering is the answer. It's like, oh, we'll pre-render on a server, send you the image, a snapshot, right? It's not interactive. It's dead. It's you can't do anything with it. But hopefully by the time the JavaScript wakes up and does its stuff, we have made it interactive, and you won't even notice the switcheroo, and then you can play with it. So that's kind of where we are. This is kind of the status quo. And so the thing that's different about Qwik is that, let me back up a second. The problem is that there's this delay between like you think you have a page, like imagine
really
somebody
quick. It's sounding really robotic all of a sudden.
Oh no, is it me?
And I hear it when you're
now you're muted. I can't hear you. I cannot hear you.
I don't know what all my mics and stuff are trying to do. This is when we have backup.
Okay, I think your mic is working now. I can hear you now. While we're waiting, I think I can tell bad computer jokes. That's my favorite thing. I like dad jokes, and I tell dad jokes to my kids.
That would
And
work too.
so do you know where I keep my dad jokes?
No, where?
In a base. Okay.
Okay, cool. And apparently it was just me. So, Bluetooth headsets are amazing, but not always your friend. So, gotta
Yeah.
to the old, sturdy plug-in one.
Yeah. So Bluetooth is, well, let's not go there. It's a complicated thing. Okay. So where were we? We were talking about kind of how we went through stages of developing our applications, right? And so currently we're in this stage where, you're on Twitter, somebody sends you a link and it's like, I don't know, shoes. You want to buy shoes, right? You click on the shoes and you immediately see the shoes and there's a buy button, right? And you try to click the buy button and it doesn't work because it takes like, I don't know, 10 seconds for all this JavaScript to kind of wake up and do its thing, etc. And finally the thing works, right? And so people are like, screw it, I really don't need the shoes that much. And so they leave. So there is a need to have the applications that just come on instantly, right? The problem is that we kind of don't have the technology, right? Like the technology we have is server-side render HTML, which is a static snapshot, right? Send it to the client. While the person is looking at the static thing, we download all the JavaScript, all the behavior, and then we re-render everything. And we do this like switcheroo where we like switch you the interactive one for the static one, and hopefully you won't even notice. And then you can do stuff. And the problem is on a mobile device, that could be like 10, 15, even 30 seconds. Right? It's like,
I have like, I don't know if I can still imagine that. Like everything loads so quickly.
It depends. Like, so, if you have an iPhone and if you have a 5G network, it's not so bad. It could be like a couple of seconds. If you, on the other hand, have like a super old Motorola device, right, and you're like in 3G, then yeah, it can take a long time. Okay.
Yes.
So Qwik is basically what I like to think of it as the next stage of this particular game. And what the Qwik tries to do and says, you know what? Instead of sending you static snapshot, and then trying to spend all this time trying to figure out where so let me back up a second. Like what makes a HTML static, right? And the answer is, well, it's the lack of listeners, right? You didn't attach any behavior to it. So you have the tree, you have everything rendered, but there's nothing attached to it. And because there's nothing attached to it, like, clicking the button doesn't do anything, right? Because you didn't tell the computer or the browser, like, what should happen when I click this button? And because you didn't tell that to the browser, obviously browser won't do anything, right? Like you click on a button, nothing happens.
Right.
And so the problem is like, well, how do we figure out what listener goes where? And the answer to it is this process we called hydration, but basically just means just run the damn application from the very, very beginning. And whatever it produces, that's for your listeners, right?
Got it.
Running it from the very, very beginning is huge amount of expense that we would like to avoid. So Qwik has kind of coined the term called resumable. And the idea behind Qwik is that you want to run the application on a server, get it to a particular state, serialize it into the HTML, including the listeners, send it to the client, and the client can just continue exactly where the server left off. Right? And so because of that, you get rid of that time, this delay. Right? So Qwik is kind of weird and hard to explain because usually when you look at different frameworks, you are comparing the developer experience. Like, do I use templates? Do I use JSX? Do I, like, how exactly am I going to tell the computer what to do?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And some people like one, some people like the other, and like, we have debates about what's better, like whatever, right? At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. You're just really telling the computer, like, I want this to happen.
Right.
So the thing that's different about Qwik is not how you tell to the computer, but actually what Qwik does underneath so that it can skip this step, right? And so when you start playing with Qwik, you look at it, you go like, this looks just like React. And the answer is, yep, that's kind of intentional. Like, the fact that it looks just like React is not a coincidence. But what's different, what's unique about it is what actually happens. Now, for a small Hello World app, the difference is kind of trivial and not really interesting. But if you get like into a large application, the fact that Qwik can skip hydration is pretty cool. Maybe I'll tell you one more thing, and then we jump into maybe some coding.
Cool.
Are you familiar with virtual machines?
Like virtual servers, or
yeah, like so VMware came out like maybe 20 years ago, and they had this crazy thing that was kind of mind-blowing when I first saw it, where you could open up a browser, or sorry, open up like another computer inside of your computer. Like, it's so meta,
yeah. Okay.
And so the main computer is called the host computer, and the thing that you're opening inside of it is called the virtual computer. And it was kind of like what the craziness is this? So the thing with the virtual machines is that you are, for example, running on a Windows, and you boot up like Linux inside of it, right, inside of VirtualBox, and then the boot up process is slow, like on all computers. Like, it takes several minutes for it to come up, and then once it boots up, the crazy thing you can do with the VM is you can, let's say you open up like a Chrome browser, you can save it, and it saves it to the disk, and then you can take that file and you can give it to your friend, and that friend can like just resume the file, and they skip the boot up process.
Oh.
Right? They don't go through boot up and opening up Chrome. They literally just open it, and they're like, Chrome open, application running, system booted. Like, what?
That's
like,
cool.
How did you manage to skip the stuff in between?
Yeah.
Well, that's because the VM fully saves everything into that file so that it can just resume where it left off. All right, and this is what we mean by resumability. So the thing with Qwik that we're trying to do is we want to make the web resumable. So we want the web to be just like the VM machine, where the boot up process, right, that is called the hydration, or like the thing that figures out where the listeners go and runs the application, all that stuff. We want to skip that part, right? We want to go straight to like, okay, the application is running, go. Okay. And so that's kind of the magical bit behind Qwik. Is not that it's trying to build the app differently or like in a different style from a developer point of view. It's that what happens underneath is different. And the result is that instead of forcing the browser to download all the JavaScript ahead of time and then execute all the JavaScript ahead of time, which is expensive, we figured out a way to do it the other way around, where like the browser doesn't really download anything. And then when you start interacting with the page, then we only download that very specific thing that's needed for that interaction, right? So like if you think about a larger application, like Amazon app, right? You could have like code for like adding things to shopping cart, code for like looking at the product from a different angle, code for like commenting on the product, code for like sending a review, code for asking for refund, code for like navigating. Like there's a bajillion things you can do, right?
Right.
But you don't do all of those things at once. You only do one of them, right? Like I want to look at the product from a different angle is just a tiny sliver of what the application can do. And so instead of downloading everything ahead of time and then running everything ahead of time, which is expensive, Qwik basically says, actually, you only want to just look at the product from a different angle. So I'm only going to download that particular piece of code.
So that answers my actual follow-up question, which was going to be is the difference of that compared to caching, and how you explain that it only loads that particular piece. That's going to be a lot different than caching, where it previously loaded and tries to cause it to go a bit faster.
Yeah. So, I mean, caching is a very complicated term in terms of like, it could be used all over the place, right? So like not exactly sure what you mean by it. Like in the case of HTML, when you when you render the HTML on a server.
Mm-hmm.
We definitely cache that on a system that's called a CDN, content delivery network.
Mm-hmm.
And so CDN is basically the thing that actually serves up the file. And so yes, you can definitely cache it at that layer so that when you navigate to the sneaker, for example, the CDN can instantly just be like, yo, here's the file, go.
I think
Right.
I'm thinking more like browser caching, because if we're on the browser side, we wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
necessarily need it to be cached, because Qwik is made to load when just for a specific part. It doesn't need to previously, like, it'll load faster from the very beginning instead of having to have it cached and on the browser side to be able to load quicker.
Yeah. So caching is about faster delivery of the content.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a second problem, which is when the browsers, when the application starts up on the client, it
Mm-hmm.
has to execute the application, right? And browsers don't really know how to cache the execution, right? The execution is actually code running that has to happen, right? And
Okay.
so even if you somehow deliver all the JavaScript quickly to the client because it's cached and whatever, you're still paying for the cost of like running it all. And so, in a way, you can think of Qwik as a way of caching it. So, Qwik basically figured out a way to run it once on a server, cache the result in such a way so that on the client, the browser can continue from where the server left off, rather than going all the way to the beginning and redo all that work.
All right. I think like it sinks in enough. This is something that I've definitely had to learn, where I'm like, it makes enough sense, yet it's going to be something that I got to noodle on. And knowing my luck, I'm going to have like a question for you in like 2 weeks and being like, okay, cool. I will tweet you and see if I can get this answered. But
You know, this is a hard concept because like we've been actually struggling with it to explain it to the people on Twitter of like how different it is,
yeah.
because people are used to looking at the world in a particular way.
Hmm.
And so if you come with something different, they're like, so it's just like this other thing. It's like, no, no, no. So it's just like that thing. It's like, well, no. Right. And so um, it is a different enough thing that it's not immediately obvious why it's different. So
Okay. But I think I enjoy being newer to it, because I'm like, okay, cool. Like I do, like, we all do need to compare it to something, because it's kind of hard
yeah.
to conceptualize. Yet at the same time, I'm like, I feel like I'm new enough that I'm like, I don't have a ton to compare it to.
Okay, let's do some coding and let's see if maybe
Yay.
examples will help it. So, okay, you have a new thing here. Excellent. The magical command to get started with Qwik is npm create Qwik at latest. Qwik at
Latest.
there you go. So that should download and install things. Yep. And sure, you can start with that folder name.
Okay, that works.
And so you want to do Qwik City. Yep. Express sounds good. Prettier sounds good.
I do like prettier. It makes
All
me
right.
happy.
Yeah. So now you can follow those steps. So cd into Qwik app and then do npm install. And then we should probably get the Visual Studio running inside of that folder so that we can look around.
This is a very, very random thing to
Yeah.
appreciate, but it's pretty and it has emojis. It makes it easier to comprehend as somebody that's newer to this, as someone that is I'm also horribly dyslexic, so it'll take me a while to like reread things. Having the different icons and like next steps and those type of things makes it a lot easier to go look at it and go, okay, cool, this is what I've done so far, these are next steps. So
I will
compliments
let
on that.
thank you. I will let Adam and Manu know. Adam and Manu are the two people who are working on it most of the time.
Yes, please thank them. I'm still getting used to this keyboard. I'm used to typing on my laptop itself. And since having to do two screens, I'm like, wait, this is a new keyboard.
It's I type fast on a keyboard, except when somebody's watching, and then I can't type to save my life.
Well, I'm glad that it's not just me.
Yeah, it's the moment somebody's watching, you're like, whoop, I can't type.
Yes. And for those that are watching, do you have any questions so far? I feel like a lot of you are on the more technical side as well. And we went through theory of some basics, which I really appreciate. So, anyone else have any questions so far?
Before you type npm start, if you type code dot, it should open up the VS Code in that folder. Code space dot, sorry.
Yeah, you're right.
Never mind. Okay.
Well, my VS Code doesn't.
That's okay. That's okay. I'll just click on the open button over there, and then we can just open the folder.
I need to remember where it is. It's supposed to be in here, but I didn't move it into there, so it's over here.
Qwik app at the top. Here we go. Yep, there we go.
Yay.
Okay. So if we just do npm start over there. Okay. And yep, if you open up localhost 3000, usually if you do it in an incognito window, it's kind of nicer because then we can make sure there's no like third-party extensions adding JavaScript, which happens oftentimes. Okay, so here's your hello world of Qwik City. This would be identical to just about any framework you would open up, right? That is not kind of the interesting bit. So I want to show you the interesting bit. So if you right-click on it somewhere and go open up the developer tools, go to the network tab.
Let me get this bigger. It like went into a very weird.
Okay, and refresh this page again. Okay, and let's see. So if you click on JS, you have on the top, it says fetch code. It says JS, fetch XHR and JS CSS. It's a
yes.
to the right of it. No, the JS one. So you're saying I only want to see the JavaScript that's coming down. Okay, so we're in a dev mode, and because we're in a dev mode, we're using this thing called Vite. Vite is like a server for refreshing your thing, and one of the things it does is called hot module reloading. Anyways, Vite is a dev mode only thing, and it would not be available in production. So that we're only seeing it. So you see where it says filter? You can type in Vite, and then there's a check mark that says invert. And then click on the invert check mark. Okay. And the thing I want to show you is that you have no JavaScript downloaded onto the page. Right?
Okay.
Because Qwik kind of figured out, looked at it and says like, but this is a static page. There's no need for JavaScript in here anywhere. And so it didn't send anything down. If you were to use any other framework, like whether it be, it doesn't matter, like whatever framework you would choose, the existing frameworks basically can't do this. They would be like, code, let's send it over to the client, whether you need it or not. Now, there are ways to disable JavaScript, like in the page where it's completely static. Like, of course, you can disable on any framework sending them the JavaScript. But what we're going to show you in a second is like what happens when some things are interactive and other things are static. Then, like, you can't just disable JavaScript, right? And the thing is that existing frameworks, they can't differentiate, and so they always send all the JavaScript to the client, and they always execute it, right? So now imagine in a normal setting, what you were having here is a situation where you send a static page to the client, and then you send the JavaScript, and the JavaScript like redoes everything and then repaints the static page only to come to the exact same state, which was completely pointless. But the reason we did that is because we didn't know what if there was a behavior over there. What if there was a listener that we needed to find? And because we don't know, we had to do it. And so Qwik, because it works differently, can be intelligent about it and be like, actually, I looked at it and I decided that there's no behavior. And so there's nothing that I need to do.
Everything you're saying makes sense. I think something that I'll have to try later on is doing this exact same thing with like what I built with React and then what I built with Express, because it's like what you're saying makes sense, yet a visual I think is going to be really good to do later on. I'm not too worried about it right now. I'm just excited that I got the hello worlds going on.
Okay, so let's open this file up. So I think if you go to your code, your VS Code, and if you open up the source folder, and inside of the source folder,
This is source folder,
yep,
right?
Yep,
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
it should be routes. And look for a file called index.tsx. And so this is your component, right? You can see welcome to Qwik City, the meta framework for Qwik, and this is exactly what's rendered. There's also what we call a layout. Layout is basically the banner on the top and the footer at the bottom, and that's controlled by the layout file in here. We don't have to worry about it just yet, but let's go back to index.tsx. So let's add some behavior, right? Because like as of right now, this doesn't do anything, and so it's not really that exciting. So let's say we want to allow you to click on the welcome to Qwik City title, so we can add a listener to it. So after H1, before the closing tag, you can just say on click $, and the C is capital.
Unclick?
Before H1, so it's a bracket, H1 space, on click, close bracket, right? So before the greater than sign.
Okay, sorry.
Right there, yeah. So space, on click. No, on as in like, yes,
on
thank
click.
you.
Okay,
There you go.
$sign.
It's trying to complete it for you over there. And so in here, it's going to be an arrow function. So open, close parentheses, fat arrow. And then let's do something simple like alert hello. Yep. And so no, open, close parentheses. Fat arrow means equal sign, greater than sign.
Equal.
Greater than.
Okay.
We called it the fat arrow.
Okay. See, these are the terms like I'm not used to hearing out loud, which is really helpful now that I'm learning all of that while doing these videos.
Sure. So now you can type in like say, alert, and in parentheses you can say hi or something in quotes. It's alert parentheses.
Like this.
Yeah, open parentheses. Alert, open parentheses.
Okay. Alert, open parentheses.
That's a quote, right? What you have over there.
Oh.
So you need open parentheses. There you go. And now quote.
Wow. Now quote.
Now hi.
Okay. Here.
All right.
This is what I always type.
That sounds good to me. All right. So because Vite is running, so when you save this file, it should automatically refresh the page. So there's nothing for you to do. Okay. So now if you click on welcome to Qwik City, it will send.
Oh, yay.
Okay. So the thing we're demonstrating here is that we have interaction now. And so while at the beginning, you could say like, oh, no JavaScript needs to be sent to the client. Now you can't do this, right? You can't just like blindly not send any JavaScript to the client because you wouldn't have the interaction. So now the problem becomes is that all the existing frameworks are like, well, we have to have JavaScript behavior. And so they would send all of it down. What I mean that all of it is all of it that you see on a page, meaning including the header, the footer, the text, everything that you see on a page would be sent. So if you hit OK, and if you click on a network tab again, we still have network tab. Okay, refresh this page. And again, notice the network tab is empty, right? Meaning no JavaScript got sent to the client. Now go and click on your welcome to Qwik City. Notice that JavaScript downloaded and executed. Now hit OK on that. And if you click on the code that's downloaded, again, if you click on response, okay, notice that the only thing that downloaded is just your alert, right? The file you wrote, if you look at the file you wrote, is much longer, right? It's multiple lines of code. It has all kinds of stuff in here. And yet the system kind of looked at it and said, yeah, but the only thing you really need is just the alert and nothing else.
I'm curious just to see. like the difference on the console. And inspect. And then we were in network, bytes.
Yeah, so if you refresh here, you'll see tons of code download. Although,
oh wow, that
this
is so cool.
Google search is not the best example because Google search is actually also one of these frameworks that knows how to lazy load JavaScript. But if you would go to what's a good example? I don't know. Go to like Target or one of those e-commerce stores. That doesn't matter. And so if you look at, yeah, see all the insane JavaScript that's coming down.
And then is Builder.io, is that built with Qwik?
Our homepage is built with Qwik, yes, and we're working on to allow other people to do this as well. So Builder.io is CMS system. CMS means content management system.
Okay.
Yeah, if you look at view page source, if you look at the network, oops, no, sorry, not view page
wrong
source,
one.
inspect. And if you do network and refresh this. So there are some JavaScript loaded, but not a lot. So the thing you're literally looking for is the size of it. Partytown is another technology we have for moving third-party code off the main thread, but that for another day.
Yeah, I'm like, that's for another time. But it's really cool seeing how.
Yeah. So the thing we could do is if you open up a new tab, and in a new tab you also go to Builder.io, but this time add !, render equals next. But add on the URLs, just say !, on the end of it, just say !, render equals next. So this is going to render using Next.js, which is a React system. And now go to inspect. And now look at the network and refresh this page. And look at all the code that's being downloaded.
Oh, wow.
Right? And now compare that to the other page you had, which just has 2 items in there. Now, of course, if you interact with the menu, right, like if you hover over the menu, you will see more code downloads, right?
Yeah.
Some more code downloads as you
or if I scroll because we're looking at different things, like this is interactive.
Right. So notice the difference, right? The difference is in a classical system, like everything is front loaded, whereas here everything it's push versus pull, right? Like in the old system, like everything is pushed to the client eagerly, and now we're flipping it around and saying, actually, let me just pull on the stuff that I need. And it's not the same amount of code in front of you versus behind you. It's like all of it in front of you, or just the tiny sliver of the things that you need to get the thing that the user actually asked for, right? So if I say add to the shopping cart, then I'm only going to download the shopping cart code and not the commenting code, right? If I'm commenting on something, then I'm only going to download the commenting code, but not the shopping cart code or the menu code or the return or feedback code or whatever, right? Like there's gazillion things you can do on a website.
Something that I just want to point out is it even for while I'm scrolling and having to gain more content, it only loaded in 546 milliseconds, where like the JavaScript version was 1.3 seconds, and then target was 3.56 seconds.
Yeah.
So this is something. This is something that also would tremendously help with SEO too, to be able to talk to marketing or small businesses. Now, can I ask you like a totally random thing about Builder.io? Because I was looking at it. So is Builder.io just is it a website builder then?
So this is where it kind of gets hard to explain. In a way, yes, but it's a very particular kind of website builder, right?
Okay.
Imagine you're Target.com. You cannot run Target.com on something like Wix. So Wix is a builder, right? Because there's just like so much complicated things that they need specifically to them. So builders are website builders are kind of targeting I guess mom and pops, like small businesses that don't really have a lot of complicated stuff in there. Something like Target, like it probably has 100 engineers working on this thing, complicated shopping cart, like all kinds of stuff. There's no way you can run it on a basic builder. So what Builder.io is kind of a builder, but for like enterprises.
Mm-hmm.
And specifically, the thing over there is that enterprises have their own technology stack, and Builder integrates with the technology stack. Versus something like Wix basically says, we are the technology stack and take it or leave it. Right? So the difference is like, do you play with whatever the customer already has, or do you say, no, this is it? Right? And that's kind of the difference. Most website builders are like, this is it, take it or leave it. You cannot modify things inside of it. Whereas Builder.io is really meant for enterprises that have complicated needs, and we can work with whatever existing technologies they happen to have.
That's really cool. I went to Verizon because I used to work for this company
Mhm.
back in the day, and the website would always take forever to load. So I was just
Mhm.
curious, but it's still saying, uh 729 milliseconds.
So a better thing to look at is not load. So load means how long it took to download all the code. The
Okay.
blue one, it says DOM content loaded. That is
Uh-huh.
a better number. So that's also says 500. So really to look at it properly, you actually, let's go to Builder, because Builder has it built both in Next.js and on Qwik, right? So this is
Mm-hmm.
the Qwik version, and
Mm-hmm.
the other one over is the other one. So let's do this experiment. Click on a performance tab inside of the DevTools, and click on the next whatever, the recycling, the arrow with a pointing to itself. You see the in the left, yeah, that thing, yeah, and just let it do its thing, and just wait. Okay, good. And then do the same exact thing on the Next.js website. So it's the same exact website.
And that one was under performance. Yeah.
Yeah, it's under performance. Yeah, click that button and just let it do its thing. And okay, because these are different sites, they'll be scaled differently.
Mm-hmm.
So it's important to kind of look
Oh,
at it.
cool.
But look at all the yellow stuff that you see at the top.
Yeah.
Or you can see the JavaScript at the bottom, the pie chart. It says 1.281 milliseconds, so 1.2 seconds, right? Was the JavaScript time for it to come to life, and all the yellow is basically JavaScript running on the
Okay.
client. And so you can see that on your modern device, we're talking about 1.5 seconds of JavaScript hammering your device, right? And this is a desktop device, versus if you have a mobile, this easily could be 3, 4, 5, even 10 times longer, right? Because it's a mobile device, which is not as powerful. Now go to the Qwik version of this. And you need to scroll to the top, because you scroll to the top. There we go. Now do the button again, the performance button,
Oh,
refresh.
yeah.
Okay, just give it a second. And we should see similar kind of graph. Notice how much
cool.
less yellow is in there.
Yeah.
Not only how much less yellow, but look at the summary, the scripting. It says 67 milliseconds
Mm-hmm.
versus 1,280 or something.
Mm-hmm.
1,281, right? Like, huge difference. I'm sorry, it was 67 milliseconds versus the other one was 800, I think, not 1,000. That thing was the overall system, I think. Was 821, sorry, my fault.
Yeah.
So we're talking huge difference of the amount of JavaScript that got downloaded to make this page interactive. And so what Qwik is about is not about a different way of building your site in terms of the developer experience. It's about different way of delivering the content to the browser so that the browser doesn't choke when we first navigate to a page.
This is very, very cool. And I feel like now that words is going to help, like I'm like excited about it, yet I'm working on formulating my questions, because it definitely, I can see how this would really help with websites and those type of things on now, because I've noticed in, like, if I'm doing something in HTML or CSS or JavaScript or React, there's slightly different variations on how to do something.
Mm-hmm.
Is, with your experience in I'm not sure the best way to ask this. Is it much different from being able to do it? You said it's very comparable to React in the way you build something.
Yep.
Okay. So if those who know React, it may be a bit easier for them to use Qwik compared to those who know Express, for example.
Well, Express is a backend technology, right? So let's build a counter, let's say, in here, and maybe if we have a few more minutes, and then maybe we can call it a day, because it's about an hour, right? You want to aim for?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's make a new component. So I think if you go at like line 12, you can type in component, and I think it should autocomplete if we got this right. Yeah, component $. See what it says, component $, and just hit. Sorry. You clicked on the first one. You were supposed to click on the second one. The one with the box, the empty box, the second one.
Okay. Oh, cool.
It generated a lot of stuff in there. Okay, that's okay. We'll just use this. Just call it a counter. So just type counter with a capital C.
Where?
Just start typing right now without doing anything. Just type counter. Capital C do. Okay. So no space, delete the space. Perfect. Okay, so what we did is we created a new component, and the component is called the counter. You can see it on line 16. There's the counter props. We're not going to use any props, so it's unnecessary. The template generated all this extra things that is unnecessary for us. Line 17 has use store. It's red, so I think you have to click on it and hit Control Spacebar, I think, to autocomplete, and call second one. And sorry, you added some extra stuff, but it did import. So just make sure it's a store. Delete the extra.
Yeah, that's weird.
There we go. Did it not do an import? Yeah. Sorry. You know what? I think it's Apple or Control and then period. And I don't know if you have a Mac or Windows.
Yeah.
Apple 1 is on the Mac. Apple period.
Yeah.
There we go. And add missing function to no, not you update import. That's what you want. There we go. Now it's happening.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a button, and the button is line 23. You can see that there is a button, and it has an on-click behavior, and the on-click behavior updates the count. And on line 24, we just print the value. And then the only thing we have to do is now refer to the counter from the main example, right? So if you go down line 8.5.
You do. Yes.
So in line 8.5, we would like to say counter with a angle brackets, right?
So on the same line?
So 8.5 is my way of saying insert a new line between 8 and 9.
Okay, that's what I was thinking, but thank you for the clarification. Okay, I'm sorry. What did you say we were inserting?
Counter, so angle bracket. So open, what is it? The greater or less than sign. There we go. Counter, perfect. You just hit enter on it, and then backslash, so that it be set close it, and then closing angle bracket. There you go. And why is it complaining? Oh, because it wants a step. Sorry. So in there, counter, put space, step equals 1. Step. So that's like a parameter to it, right? And I think the 1 has to be a number. So yeah, perfect. Exactly. You got it.
Cool.
So now if you go to our Qwik tab, we have a counter.
Oh, yeah.
And again, look at the bottom. There is no JavaScript.
Yeah.
And if you click on the counter, JavaScript downloads and it updates the count. Right? So now notice this. You click on a counter, it downloads some JavaScript.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you click on the welcome to Qwik City, it downloads more JavaScript.
Okay.
Right? So instead of having a world where all the JavaScript is eagerly delivered to the client, and for Hello World, it's trivial, it doesn't matter. But for large websites, this becomes a problem. We have this other world where instead of delivering everything at once, we actually deliver just the bit that you need to perform the operation and nothing else.
Yeah. This makes sense. This makes sense. Now, to one day, I do need to work through remaking all of these myself, which has been interesting to say the least. But this is really cool how it does that in with much less load time. And now I'm curious, when you've said that you're explaining this to people, that it can be kind of hard to explain.
Mm-hmm.
Do you normally show them the network load times? Is that how you normally explain it?
Yeah, network load times is usually what I focus on. I think the reason is that people have preconceived notions of things,
Mm-hmm.
and so if somebody already knows Angular, React, and Vue, they have a very clear idea of what a framework is.
Mm-hmm.
And when you come up with it with Qwik, the difference is not necessarily of how it looks like, but what it does underneath it. And my argument is that all the existing frameworks, they do it by eagerly pushing JavaScript to the client.
Mm-hmm.
And so to even suggest that you could flip this around and have this lazy is, I think it just doesn't fit into people's mental model. And because of that, people are just having trouble understanding it, because they look at this thing and they go like, well, it looks just like React, so like why do we need another framework that looks just like React, right? And what they're not really or rather what I'm failing to explain, what's not really clicking, is that it's not about the developer experience. It's not about
Mm-hmm.
what you as a developer write. It's about the end result of what gets fed to the browser.
Mm.
So Qwik is a new kind of framework that has a developer experience similar to React, and React is a loved developer experience by a lot of people, right? So we
Mm-hmm.
think we have a good developer experience there, but it's not about that, right? It's about the fact that when you have large websites, you will end up suffering the fate of too much JavaScript being downloaded eagerly. And what Qwik aims for is to make sure that that doesn't happen, right? That instead of eagerly downloading JavaScript, it becomes lazy. And instead of like downloading all of the JavaScript, it becomes download just the bare minimum that you need to get the job done. So it really kind of flips the way code is delivered to the client. And as I said, for small websites, it makes no difference. It's when
Yeah.
you get big, right, that like it makes a huge difference.
And I think this is going to be a very not related, but possibly related question. Of when I worked in hosting and it was at GoDaddy and people were comparing load times, it a lot of it was with WordPress, but WordPress you wouldn't be able to use something like Qwik because it's built with.
Yeah, because WordPress is its own way of doing things,
Yeah,
right?
that's what I thought.
So,
Okay.
and essentially, it competes with Qwik.
Okay.
And not really, because it's a different thing. It's
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, but
Yeah.
it controls the rendering pipeline. Like I
Hmm.
guess WordPress they could migrate on top of Qwik, and then
Hmm.
they would get these benefits. But like that's such a complicated and huge effort that nobody's going to do that.
Yeah,
Um,
but it makes
yeah,
sense. Thank you for helping close that loop for me because I was like,
yeah.
this is where most people, but I get like WordPress is like a more technical website builder kind of thing with that type of format.
Mhm.
Uh, and Davey Co is saying could go headless.
Yeah, so that's Builder.io, right? Builder.io is a headless CMS. So WordPress is hosted CMS. I think that's what the term is for it, right? So CMS being content management system, right? Like you have some content that you want to tell
Hmm.
your readers and you want to change it all the time. Um, and so that whole headless thing is the, I want to modify content without um, having engineers involved in the process. Because like the last thing engineer wants to know is like, oh, you wanted 10% sale last week, but now you want a 15% sale. Really? Like that's what my job is, to change the percentages.
Got it. Got it. Okay, cool. Well, I think that definitely gotten a lot of knowledge drop from you. Anything else that you think we should know before letting you go today?
Um, no, just I love coding, and I think it's just the amount of time you spend on it. So like, I would like to just encourage you to just not give up on this, and just and the more, it's like everything else in life, the more you know about a particular topic, the more enjoyable it becomes, right?
Definitely.
That's what I always tell my kids. It's like the only reason you're not enjoying this thing is because you don't know enough about it.
Yes, and it's horribly on days that I don't have a guest, I've been doing co-work with me, like co-work with Jen, and it's really embarrassing when I'm working through it and people are joining and they're like, "Jen, we did this instead." And I'm like, "I'm trying." I just don't
Yes,
get
there's
it.
millions of different ways of doing things, and it just takes time. So don't give up.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And we hope to keep you in the loop on this journey. I know you have lots of shows to be on, but thank you for your time today. We appreciate
You're
it,
welcome.
Miško.
You're welcome.